Hey, Shawn and I are back with round 3 of Faber stories. This one is Homeland by Barbara Kingsolver. Yes, I am so excited. Can you tell? Barbara Kingsolver is one of my favorite authors. I've never met her, but I'm just positive we would be really good friends. She just writes from all of the places that my heart lives. She writes about colonialism in Africa. She writes about the environment in Appalachia. She writes about politics on the East Coast. She's a brilliant novelist in my perspective. She's also a brilliant essayist. Yes, she is. And I believe that she is going to be a brilliant short story writer. The jury's still out. This is my first short story, I think, from Barbara Kingsolver. And I have read the first 10 pages and I already love it. Curious to hear what Shawn thinks. I'm also curious to hear if Shawn's read any of her novels. Not 100% sure Shawn would love her as much as I do. She can be perceived as a little bit preachy. She's heavy on themes in her writing. Yes, she is. All of them. She always has something to say. But in this story, again, she's got something to say. I know she does. But I am going to do something that I don't normally do. I'm going to read to you from the cover in the inside flap and the first couple pages and just let you get a feel for it. I just think this one is put together so very well. They did a good job. Fingers crossed she can stick the landing, but I have great faith. So let's read what Faber has to say and what Barbara herself has to say. Barbara Kingsolver's work has been translated into more than 20 languages and has earned a devoted readership. Yes, it has. Her 14 books of fiction, poetry, I gotta try that too, and nonfiction include the international bestseller, The Poisonwood Bible, The Lacuna, which won the Orange Prize for Fiction in 2010, Flight Behavior in 2012, and most recently Unsheltered in 2018. Before she made her living as a writer, Kingsolver earned degrees in biology, yes, and worked as a scientist. She now lives with her family on a farm in southern Appalachia. You have to marry outside your clan, she said. That's law. All the people we knew were Bird Clan. All the others were gone. When Gloria's great-grandmother, Greenleaf, left her home in the Hiawatha Valley of Tennessee, that's where I am, it was with a man on a stolen horse. She was one of the fugitive bands of Cherokee who resisted capture long ago. Decades later, her family takes Great Ma'am on a road trip home, but the place that holds the scattered bones of her ancestors is no longer the land she remembers. My great-grandmother belonged to the Bird Clan. Hers was one of the fugitive bands of Cherokee who resisted capture in the year that General Winfield Scott was in charge of prodding the forest people from their beds and removing them westward. Those few who escaped his notice moved like wildcat families through the Carolina mountains, leaving the ferns unbroken where they passed, eating wild grapes and chestnuts, drinking when they found streams. The ones who could not travel, the aged and the infirm and the very young, were hidden in deep cane thickets where they would remain undiscovered until they were bones. When the people's hearts could not bear any more, they laid their deerskin packs on the ground and settled again. General Scott had moved on to other endeavors by this time, and he allowed them to thrive or perish as they would. They built clay houses with thin, bent poles for spines, and in autumn they went down to the streams where the sycamore trees had let their year's work fall. The water steeped brown as tea leaves, and the people cleansed themselves of the sins of the scattered bone time. They called their refugee years the time when we were not, and they were forgiven, because they had carried the truth of themselves in a sheltered place inside the flesh, exactly the way a fruit that has gone soft still carries inside itself the clean, hard stone of its future.
Hey Doris, well, I have read the first 10 pages and I enjoyed your introduction to Barbara Kingsolver. I have not read a lot of her and she is not one of my favorites, but I appreciate some things about her writing, so I'm not nearly as big of a fan as you are. You will be pleased to know, however, that my mum loves Barbara Kingsolver and I think she would name her as her favorite writer. So Mum's read, I think, everything. I've read one of her early novels, Animal Dreams, and I don't remember a darn thing about it, but I loved it. And then I read The Poisonwood Bible, and I was completely engrossed in it, and it didn't age well in my memory. I didn't like how black and white. It was way too easy to detest the father figure, and I thought that that was a flaw in the novel, but otherwise it was a really well done novel, and that's all I've read. So I didn't find either of those novels preachy, other than I could articulate my criticism of how black and white that father figure was as a way of telling a story with a message and overdoing it. But I follow her on in the news and see some of her interviews and stuff, and I do feel that she's a little bit too preachy for my liking, but I haven't necessarily got that from what little of her fiction I have read. So this story doesn't strike me as the slightest bit preachy so far. I loved the first 10 pages, and the thing that's come up for me, and I am not an overly political reader, I know that you are, buddy, reading American Dirt with Britta right now, and certainly that novel has gotten everybody's back up, including mine, about appropriation of voice. That's an egregious case. A lot of the other times where the critique emerges that writers shouldn't write about people from other ethnic groups, I don't think are black and white. They're very, very gray. And I know that Barbara Kingsolver has been criticized by Sherman Alexie, especially for writing Native American characters and appropriating their stories. So this is about at least the super grandma, what do they call her? The great grandmother. They call her Great Ma'am. She is Native American, so presumably, obviously, the protagonist, Gloria, her great-granddaughter, is at least partially Native American. So far, it's working for me, but I am not a Native American reader by any stretch of the imagination. I can't find where this story or any of the short stories that were published in this collection, which was also called Homeland. When was this originally published? Oh, way back in 1989. I haven't been able to find anything online about people taking her to task for it. I think that's because nobody reads short stories, so she's under the radar with this. But that's an issue that's in the back of my mind as I read, and I'm looking forward to finishing the story. But no, I think the writing is just outstanding. The last sentence you read, I had already put into my commonplace book for my Sunday sentences because I thought it was just a stunning sentence. And I also like the last sentence at the bottom of page 10. I guess it's a couple sentences. I had known that hearts could break and sometimes even be attacked with disastrous result, but I had not heard of hearts remembering. I was 11 years old. I did not trust any of my internal parts with the capacity of memory. I really am enjoying the way that the 11-year-old protagonist is drawing a portrait of her great-grandma and all the storytelling and the animals and the mystery about her own life. Yeah, it's really good. So I'm looking forward to finishing it. Let's see what happens next.
Hey, Shawn, I am delighted to hear that your mom is a Barbara Kingsolver fan. We need to meet up one of these days. Me and you, your mom, and Barbara. How lovely would that be? Oh, just so lovely. And yes, indeed, I did read American Dirt. And I have thoughts. But I will be dishing the dirt on that book in another video. I read another Barbara Kingsolver this month, The Lacuna, and also Dee Dee from Brown Girl reading her Read So Lit pick for this year, which was The Last Thing You Surrender. And so reading those three books together has given me a lot of thoughts. So video coming on that. And as far as Sherman Alexie goes, I did look up the comments that you referenced, and yeah, I'll be sharing those in that video as well, not this one. But I will say Sherman Alexie has a few inappropriate things to deal with in his own life as well. So I'm just going to move on from there. This book I really loved. So when I was reading it, the words just sing. This one is so beautifully written. However, I wasn't sure of my connection to it and what I thought about it while I was reading it. You know, I finished it and I was still thinking, which that happens sometimes with short stories. I think they're often meant to be that way, to keep you thinking, to leave you on that thoughtful note. That happened to me recently with Flannery O'Connor as well. But anyway, I just kept thinking about this for 2 or 3 days, and I realized that it makes me think about my own childhood. So I grew up barefoot and sandy in the wilds of North Florida, the pine woods of North Florida. And my brother and I grew up, we played cowboys and Indians all the time. We would buy the little pop guns from the dollar store, and we would spend hours and days perfecting our bows and arrows. We made them from palmetto fronds, as you do in Florida. And yeah, those are just like treasured memories from my childhood. And thinking back, you know, there's this innocence in childhood. There's so many things like that at the time they were just things we did. And you know, those little sing-song phrases from elementary school, all sorts of things that you didn't at that age really know the societal impact of them. They were just a part of the popular culture. And yeah, but now I'm older, I'm a lot older, and much more enlightened. So I look back on that, some things from my childhood. You know, there are other things, you know, environmentally unsound practices as well, but I won't reference those. But you look back on it and you're like, wow, yeah. But this book, like the scene particularly where they're riding in the back of the pickup truck, the little girl and her brother, and, you know, going to visit where her grandmother grew up as a little girl, her grandmother that is a Native American. And, you know, on the way back, and I have those memories too, riding in the back of the pickup truck with my brother. You know, back in the day, that was a thing. That was another thing that, you know, we don't do anymore, is ride in the back of pickup trucks. But anyway, it just really, all of this got me thinking about how, you know, you're reading this book and you see that moment when the little girl who has this strong connection with her grandmother, when her eyes are kind of opened to what has gone on with the Native American heritage. You know, she's half white and half Native American on her father's side. And you know, it's like you can see the moment when the light bulb goes on for her. And the part that stuck out to me was that this brother was there right alongside of her, and that moment didn't happen for him. And I think it's just such a profound commentary on society at large. Just the way some of us grow up in the same environments and be exposed to the same things. And some of us wake up to the things that were wrong about our past, and some of us don't. I mean, I don't know how to say it, but, you know, read the book, guys. Read the book. I thought it was very well written and very, you know, intellectually stimulating about that kind of thing. But anyway, I am really curious to hear your thoughts on it, Shawn. And yeah, Tell me.
Hey Doris, lovely to hear your thoughts. And yeah, I talked to Mum. We're going to be arriving at your door in time for your birthday. So we're about to talk about books till the cows come home, or whatever the Tennessee version of that saying might be. Just kidding, but it sure would be amazing for you two wonderful women to meet and talk about Barbara Kingsolver and so on and so on. I love this story too. It's probably my favorite. I certainly loved it in a 5-star way. Just incredible story. What a refreshing change from all the crap we've had to endure. I'm looking forward to seeing your video about appropriation of voice. As I said to a mutual booktuber friend the other day, I will never figure that out. I'm not smart enough. Everybody that tells me their opinion convinces me that they're right and the other side is wrong, and that will be the way it will go, probably on into the future. So I don't have an opinion on that. This story really worked. It was powerful. And I echo your childhood memories in many ways, riding in the back of a pickup truck and growing up with all kinds of problematic attitudes. And for me, because of what's going on in Canada with the Indigenous tribal blockades shutting Canada down economically until we finally stop being racist pigs and let them make decisions about the land that belongs to them, I have been reading this book by, she wouldn't call herself a Canadian, but she lives in Canada. She would call herself a writer from the Salish tribe, Lee Markle, and this is a book of her essays, My Conversations with Canadians. And reading these two in tandem was rich, especially the Disneyfication of Native American traditions when they went back to the great-grandmother's hometown, and it was all just horrible Disneyfied bullshit, and she was not impressed. In fact, Lee Markle quotes from a book that I know that I remember that you read, Doris, Thomas King's The Inconvenient Indian. Isn't that the title? The Inconvenient Indian. And he talked about how, especially because so many Indigenous people on both sides of the Canada-US border were deprived of their cultural heritage by being imprisoned in residential schools and abused, they learned what it was to be a Native American or an Indigenous person in Canada from Hollywood. And that really resonated with what it was like for them to go to this horrible town that was just like a Disneyland with all the most ridiculous baubles and Native American stereotypes. I really enjoyed that. More powerfully, the way that the beginning and the end tied together, this historical story that I would love to know a lot more about the Bird clan of the Cherokee, the fugitive clan that escaped capture and went west through the Carolina mountains, and they had to leave their elderly and other people behind hiding in the forest so that they could make a fast getaway. And without giving away the ending, there's just a line that ties into Great Mam's idea of the little people that just ties all that up together in a really beautiful, poetic way. So much to say, this is a story I agree with you that I think every time we reread it, we're going to get a whole bunch more out of it, and that is the sign of a really successful story. Fantastic!